Why else would I be here if I'm not using this role properly to influence and help people where I can? And I like a big challenge. I do like that, but I can't do it on my own.
It wasn't a scandal in the tabloids. It wasn't shouted through headlines. It was something far worse. King Charles made a decision in silence that shattered the future of William and Catherine before they even saw it coming. For years, the public watched as William and Catherine rose through the royal ranks, their every step painted as part of a carefully choreographed path to the throne. They were the future, the polished, graceful faces of a monarchy, desperate for relevance in a changing world. The narrative seemed clear. Power was being prepared for a transition, and William, the dutiful son, along with his poised and beloved wife, was next in line. But that illusion cracked when the king made a move so quiet, it nearly went unnoticed. He simply withheld the power to grant royal warrants. On the surface, it was procedural, mundane even. But inside palace walls, it echoed like a thunderclap. This wasn't just about endorsement rights. Royal warrants are more than stamps of approval. They are the monarchy's seal of trust, an institutional handshake between the crown and commerce. For centuries, the ability to issue them has symbolized not just ceremonial authority, but the transference of influence. To be granted that power is to be acknowledged as a true royal decision-maker, and William, the heir apparent, was passed over without explanation. Catherine, who had transformed public engagement and shaped globally trends without uttering a single promotional word, was left out entirely. Insiders were stunned. Many had expected a formal announcement, one that would affirm what everyone already believed, that William and Catherine were ready to step into the roles destiny had promised them. Instead, silence. Not a denial, not a delay, just a missing gesture that screamed volumes. The omission felt deliberate, strategic, like a withheld blessing from a father who wasn't ready to let go. The absence of royal warrants triggered a quiet storm. Business leaders who had long aligned themselves with William and Catherine were caught off guard. Deals paused. Expectations shattered. Behind the scenes, royal advisors scrambled to manage the fallout, while whispers started to build. Was this an act of caution or something more personal? Was it tradition or mistrust? And that's where the fracture began to widen, not between monarch and subjects, but between father and son. To deny William such a symbolic but crucial responsibility suggested a hesitation not just in trust, but in vision. It cast doubt over the monarchy's readiness to evolve and over the king's willingness to relinquish real control. The decision may have been quiet, but its consequences were anything but. It was a betrayal dressed in formality. A father's doubt, signed not with a decree, but with omission. And for William and Catherine, it marked a turning point not just in duty, but in identity. The future they were promised was suddenly uncertain, and the institution they devoted themselves to revealed cracks far deeper than appearances ever suggested. And as the royal couple stood frozen in place, the weight of one unsigned paper began, reshaping the monarchy. This isn't just about paper and ink, it's about who truly holds the crown. Royal warrants aren't decorative, they're weapons of influence, and King Charles just refused to let William and Catherine touch them. In the world of royalty, not every gesture is grand, and not every decision is made beneath a spotlight. Some of the most defining moves happen behind closed doors, quiet, subtle, but loaded with meaning. That's exactly what makes the royal warrant so powerful. It's not just a seal, it's not just a symbol. It's a declaration, an unspoken announcement that a member of the royal family trusts you, supports you, and by extension, elevates you. A royal warrant can transform a modest family-run business into an empire overnight. It can vault unknown names into the spotlight and flood their doors with global demand. It signals reliability, tradition, excellence, but more than anything, it signals power. And that's where things get political, because this isn't just about commerce, it's about control. The ability to grant a royal warrant is restricted to only the highest ranks, the monarch, and a very select few senior working royals. When that authority is withheld, it's never by accident. It's a statement. It says, you're not ready. Or worse, you're not trusted. For decades, this power was tightly held by Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. Later, Charles, while still Prince of Wales, was permitted to issue his own warrants starting in 1980. That privilege was a quiet nod to his growing role within the monarchy, a sign that he wasn't just the heir, but a player in shaping the institution's future. For over 40 years, he exercised that authority. Now, as king, many assumed he would pass the baton to his own son. After all, William and Catherine weren't just figureheads. They had become the modern heartbeat of the royal family, carefully restoring its image after scandal, estrangement, and public distrust. But instead of honoring that path, Charles chose restraint. He chose silence. The warrants were not granted. No explanation, no formal denial, just nothing. And that nothing spoke volumes. It shattered assumptions that William was next in line, not just for the throne, but for the confidence of the institution itself. It denied Catherine the chance to support the very businesses that her image already elevated in the public eye. And it undermined a future that had already begun to take shape in the minds of the public. To the outside world, this might seem minor, a technicality perhaps, but within royal circles, it's monumental. The refusal cuts deeper than paperwork. It reflects a hierarchy that is still very much alive, one that clings to power even as it smiles for cameras, one that rewards loyalty with applause, but not always with trust, and one that, despite modern appearances, still uses silence as its sharpest blade. But it wasn't the first time a royal figure beloved by the public had been held back from this power. Princess Diana captivated the world, but behind the palace walls, even she was denied real power. Now, Catherine stands in the same shadow, admired by millions, but locked out of the room where decisions are made. Diana was more than a royal. She was a movement. Her presence lit up rooms. Her empathy broke through protocol, and her vulnerability redefined the image of monarchy for an entire generation. Yet, despite the crowds, the headlines, and the global affection that followed her every step, Diana remained, at her core, an outsider to the true inner workings of the crown. Her title brought visibility, not voice. And while she changed hearts, she was never permitted to change the system. One of the clearest signs of that restraint was the quiet exclusion from a power she never touched: royal warrants. Though seemingly trivial to the untrained eye, the authority to grant such recognition was symbolic of inclusion into the real circle of royal influence. Diana, for all her fame and emotional connection with the public, was never allowed that privilege. The message was clear: admiration was not the same as access. And when it came to real power, Diana was to remain a figurehead, not a decision-maker. It wasn't her popularity that caused alarm. It was how she wielded it. Diana didn't play by the rules. She opened up about mental health, about loneliness, about betrayal, topics that had never before been allowed to echo within palace halls. And while the public fell in love with her raw honesty, the institution retreated. What they couldn't control, they couldn't empower. And so Diana became both a legend and a liability, loved by the world, managed by the palace. Now, decades later, Catherine finds herself in a hauntingly familiar position. The face may be different, the strategy more refined, but the boundary remains unchanged. Like Diana, Catherine commands respect and affection far beyond the gates of Buckingham Palace. She is poised, elegant, loyal to a fault. But when it comes to the levers of real royal influence, she too is left waiting. The power to issue royal warrants, to formally tie her name to the future of the institution, remains withheld. It's not a reflection of failure, it's a reflection of fear. The monarchy, even in a new century, still walks the tightrope between admiration and control. Praise is plentiful, but trust? That's kept on a shorter leash, especially for the women who represent the family's future. Diana broke the mold by being too open. Catherine threatens it by being too perfect. And in both cases, the crown reacts not with confidence, but with caution. The history is undeniable. More than 100 years have passed since a Princess of Wales last held the right to grant warrants. It is a privilege long buried under layers of tradition and guarded with a silent intensity. Diana challenged that silence with fire. Catherine, with grace. But both have found the same invisible door closed in their path. And so, with history repeating itself, the whispers grew louder. Was Catherine ever meant to lead? Catherine moves markets with a glance, reshapes fashion without a word, and yet the monarchy still won't trust her with a signature of approval. What are they so afraid of? It began almost without notice. A pair of earrings, a tailored coat, a subtle clutch, ordinary accessories worn by an extraordinary woman. But when Catherine wore them, something changed. The items sold out within hours. Designers saw their websites crash. Retailers scrambled to restock. And what seemed like coincidence at first became a documented phenomenon, the Catherine effect. It wasn't just about fashion. It was about influence, global, immediate, and relentless. Her impact was undeniable. She didn't need to speak endorsements into existence. She only needed to show up. Wherever she went, the world watched, studied, and copied. Her clothing choices alone pumped billions into the fashion economy. Designers who were once obscure became household names overnight. Forgotten labels were revived. Struggling brands were saved. It wasn't marketing. It was movement. Quiet, elegant, and unstoppable. But here's the paradox. As Catherine's influence soared outside palace gates, her authority within them remained frozen. Despite the commerce she fueled, she couldn't formally support or endorse a single brand. She wasn't allowed to sign a document, issue a warrant, or officially link her name to the businesses she uplifted. The monarchy, grateful for the attention she brought, still refused to hand her the pen. This wasn't a matter of protocol, it was a matter of control. Royal warrants, those coveted marks of royal approval, could have transformed her impact into official power. But Catherine was denied that access. She remained a symbol, not a strategist, an icon, not an architect. The institution soaked up her value, yet kept her at a ceremonial distance. It feared that legitimizing her power might shift the balance too far, too fast. Behind palace walls, admiration turned into cautious management. Every appearance, every photo, every wave was applauded, but also monitored. Because Catherine wasn't just admired, she was effective, too effective. And in a system built to move slowly, her kind of influence is a risk. Power that can't be controlled is often reined in through silence, not confrontation. That's how tradition survives, not by denying talent, but by sidelining it just enough to keep it quiet. Still, Catherine has never demanded more. She has never broken ranks or stepped out of line. She plays the long game with grace. But grace doesn't mean she doesn't feel the weight. Her power is recognized by the world, yet restrained by the very institution she serves. And that quiet contradiction, that conflict between public admiration and private restriction, has become a defining feature of her royal journey. And while Catherine redefined royal elegance, she also redefined silent frustration. She's not asking for a title, she's building a legacy. While others wait for ceremony, Catherine is rewriting what it means to lead by stepping where no royal woman dared before. While the monarchy debated protocols and held tightly to ancient privileges, Catherine quietly chose a battlefield that mattered far more than pomp and pageantry early childhood. In a world where the youngest voices are often the most overlooked, she made it her mission to amplify them. Not with photo ops or shallow awareness campaigns, but with research, policy, and measurable impact. She didn't wait for the institution to hand her power, she created her own by finding purpose. At the heart of her mission lies a profound idea: that the first 5 years of a child's life shape everything that follows: mental health, academic, performance, economic stability, and even national well-being. It's an area politicians often ignore, dismissed as too slow for headline-making results. But Catherine saw what others didn't. She recognized that the future of society starts in nurseries and living rooms, not just in palaces and parliaments. So, while royal commentators debated titles and warrants, she was already moving. Under the umbrella of the Royal Foundation, she built something no royal had done before: a business task force for early childhood. It wasn't just symbolic, it was tactical. Catherine brought together titans of industry companies like IKEA, NatWest, and the UK's biggest retail chains. She didn't ask for donations or photo ops. She asked for commitments: structural change, new policies, tangible support for parents, caregivers, and early educators. In a nation where childcare costs are skyrocketing and emotional support for children is dangerously neglected, Catherine began rewriting the national conversation. This wasn't the work of a ceremonial figure. It was the work of a strategist, someone who understood that real influence doesn't always come from signing decrees. It can come from connecting the right people, shaping public discourse, and delivering results that change lives. She did what politicians rarely do. She made the moral case and the economic case for the same cause. And people listened. What makes her role revolutionary isn't the scale, it's the method. Catherine has chosen impact over visibility, substance over symbolism. While the monarchy maintains its rigid grip on tradition, she's built a parallel form of leadership, one that doesn't require formal titles or royal permissions. She's proving that power in the modern age doesn't always wear a crown. It often wears compassion backed by strategy. Yet, even as Catherine's reputation grew in government circles and business boardrooms, the palace kept its distance. She remained publicly praised but privately constrained. It was the same pattern: glorify the image, guard the power. But this time, something was different. The old playbook wasn't working. Catherine wasn't waiting for the next honor. She was already reshaping the future without it. But while Catherine's influence grew in quiet corridors, William faced a storm with no clear path forward. He trained his entire life for the throne, only to be frozen in place by the one man who should have paved the way. Behind Prince William's calm face lies a storm of royal betrayal. From the moment he could walk, William was not just a boy. He was a symbol. The heir. The future. Every move was measured. Every word weighed. He was shaped for the crown with a precision few could withstand, raised under the spotlight of legacy, duty, and expectation. And through it all, he never wavered. Not when his parents divorced under global scrutiny. Not even when he walked behind his mother's coffin, the world watching, expecting a prince, not a grieving child. He stood tall, because that's what was expected of him. That's what kings in waiting do. But now, decades later, the loyalty he gave without question is being met with hesitation. The royal warrant issue didn't just bruise his ambition, it undermined the very promise he'd been raised to believe in. After years of carrying the family's modern image, after proving again and again that he could balance tradition with progress, he was denied the one thing that would make it official: real authority. The ability to endorse, to represent, to command in the quiet but powerful way that truly matters within the monarchy. And it wasn't taken away, it was simply never given. Denied with silence, overlooked by the father he once looked up to as both monarch and mentor. The emotional toll was immediate, but not public. William said nothing. He didn't break ranks or issue statements. He kept his voice measured, his posture perfect. But inside, the frustration simmered. Behind the formality, he was being sidelined, denied not just a symbolic role, but a chance to step into the responsibility he had spent a lifetime preparing for. The very role his father had spent decades demanding. For himself was now being hoarded from the next generation. And with that denial came something more corrosive: distance. The moments between William and King Charles became fewer. The warmth, already formal, grew colder. Palace insiders noticed the shift. The dynamic between heir and sovereign no longer felt like mentorship. It felt like resistance. As if Charles, despite his public declarations of confidence, wasn't ready to let go. Or worse, didn't fully believe his son could carry the weight. The tension was never shouted, but it echoed in what was not said, in what was not done. It was in the events William didn't attend, the decisions made without him, the growing quiet between father and son. And that silence has consequences. Because the monarchy doesn't exist in a vacuum. The public sees, senses, and questions. If William is the future, why is he being held back? If Catherine represents the modern royal family, why is she still waiting for real power? These aren't just whispers, they're warnings. And they point to something far more dangerous than a temporary disagreement, a failure to transfer trust, a failure to prepare for what must come next. And as cracks formed in William's path, another ghost from the past added pressure to the palace walls. They buried their mother, hand in hand. Now, decades later, William and Harry are worlds apart, and the fractures in their bond are echoing through the palace with dangerous force. Once, they were inseparable, two boys forged in grief, walking side by side through one of the most televised tragedies in modern history. The image of William and Harry following Princess Diana's coffin is etched into the global consciousness, a portrait of loss, of brotherhood, of silent strength. They were more than princes. They were each other's lifelines, bound by a childhood marked by privilege and pain, legacy and longing. For years, that bond seemed unbreakable. But bonds forged in fire can also shatter under pressure. Diana's influence on both sons was profound, but different. William absorbed her grace and restraint, learning to balance emotion with responsibility. Harry, on the other hand, inherited her raw vulnerability, her instinct to rebel against the suffocating norms of palace life. Both loved her fiercely. Both were shaped by her absence. But as they grew into men, the same memory that once united them began to drive a wedge between them. William carried the burden of destiny. Every step, every statement, every silence was calculated against a future crown. He walked the path of duty, suppressing personal emotion for public service. Harry, however, began questioning that path. The endless protocols, the media intrusion, the expectations he never asked for it all felt like a cage. And where William saw responsibility, Harry saw sacrifice without reward. The difference wasn't just philosophical, it became personal. Small tensions grew into quiet disagreements. Disagreements turned into distance. And before long, the once unshakable foundation began to crack. Harry's decision to step back from royal duties wasn't the first blow, but it was the loudest. It wasn't just an exit, it was an escape. He left the family, the country, and the institution, taking Meghan and their children with him. And, in doing so, he left William to bear the full weight of the monarchy alone. But it wasn't just about leaving, it was about what was said afterward. Interviews, headlines, books. Accusations of neglect, racism, and indifference hit the monarchy like a thunderclap. For William, who had spent his life protecting the image of the institution, it was a betrayal deeper than any press scandal. It wasn't just his brother walking away. It was his brother pointing a finger as he closed the door. And yet, beneath the public tension lies something more tragic, a sadness that neither man will ever fully speak aloud. Because behind the royal duties and tabloid narratives are two boys who once shared a world no one else could understand. And now, that world is gone. The silence between them is no longer just strategic, it's emotional, it's generational, and it's devastating. The royal family projects unity, but this fracture runs deeper than protocol can hide. To the public, William represents the steadfast future. Harry, the emotional exile. But to each other, they are the reflection of what was lost, brothers shaped by the same storm, now walking in opposite directions. And while Harry walked away from the crown, William was left to carry its growing weight alone. A king battling cancer. A future king left powerless. The throne sits on a ticking clock, and if Charles refuses to pass the torch, the monarchy could crumble from within. For all its pomp and ceremony, the British monarchy is at its most vulnerable in moments of transition. And now, that moment has arrived. King Charles, once the longest-serving heir in British history, is now an aging sovereign fighting a private war against a very public disease. His battle with cancer has added a layer of urgency to a monarchy already shaken by division, distrust, and delay. Yet instead of preparing the nation for a seamless shift in leadership, Charles seems to be tightening his grip on the crown with each passing day. To the outside world, his restraint is read as caution. But within palace walls, it's creating cracks that no ribbon-cutting ceremony can hide. By withholding formal powers from William powers that include not just royal warrants, but critical influence over institutional direction, Charles isn't protecting tradition. He's paralyzing progress. The monarchy cannot afford hesitation. Not now. Not when global scrutiny is rising. Not when royal favor is fraying. And not when the public, once deferential, is beginning to question what exactly the crown is waiting for. The symbolism is not lost on insiders. A king in declining health, unwilling to share the tools of governance with the very man who has spent a lifetime being shaped to use them. What was once a natural generational handoff now feels like a quiet standoff, one marked not by confrontation, but by deliberate avoidance. There are fewer joint appearances, fewer shared statements, and in the absence of clarity, speculation has filled the void. And with speculation comes risk. Every pause, every delayed transfer of responsibility chips away at the monarchy's greatest asset, stability. The public sees William standing in for his father at engagements, supporting Catherine through her own challenges, presenting a united, modern front. But they also see the contradiction. The man who should be preparing to lead is still asking for permission to act. The result is confusion. And confusion breeds doubt. That doubt doesn't stay inside palace gates. It seeps into headlines, into business circles, into the whispers of politicians and international leaders who rely on consistency from Britain's symbolic center of power. The monarchy was built on continuity. Its very survival depends on smooth transitions. But instead of preparing for what's next, Charles seems determined to preserve what was, and the consequences may be irreversible. A monarchy that delays, too long, loses more than relevance. It risks becoming an institution seen as incapable of adapting. And for William, the longer he's kept in the wings, the harder it becomes to step forward with the authority the moment demands. And at the heart of it all, one question refuses to fade. They've earned the public's love, but never the crown's. Trust. William and Catherine are symbols of modern royalty, yet they remain chained to a system terrified of change. Across the United Kingdom and far beyond, William and Catherine are admired not just for what they represent, but for how they carry it. They've walked through scandals, endured relentless public scrutiny, and navigated the ever-shifting expectations of a modern monarchy with poise. To millions, they are already the face of the future. But beneath the surface, where legacy and authority are carefully guarded, the institution they serve has stopped short of empowering them. They are celebrated with applause, but withheld the power to act. And admiration without authority eventually becomes a curse. Because the longer the public is led to believe that William and Catherine are leading, while they remain, technically, sidelined, the greater the gap between perception and reality grows. It is a dangerous illusion, one that chips away at the very credibility the monarchy depends on. The monarchy can endure tradition. It can survive scrutiny. But it cannot survive the erosion of trust. And trust is built not just through smiling engagements and graceful appearances. It's cemented by decisive action, by passing the torch before the flame dims. Delayed transitions are not harmless. They aren't about ceremony, they're about survival. The longer Charles holds the crown, but withholds the responsibilities that should logically pass to his heir, the more unstable the institution becomes. It invites doubt. It invites division. And it allows old fractures between brothers, between generations, between monarchy and people to deepen into fault lines. William and Catherine embody a new kind of royalty, one that is human, accessible, transparent in a way their predecessors never were. They speak not from thrones, but from shared experience. They raise their children in ways that mirror modern families. They champion causes that touch the everyday person. They are not symbols of unreachable majesty, they are mirrors of a changing world. But that very evolution, that quiet reshaping of what royalty can mean, is what makes the system hesitate. Because change within the monarchy doesn't come without resistance. And the institution, as history has proven, does not release its grip easily. Still, time is running out. The world is watching. The public is listening for a sign, any sign that the crown is ready to look ahead rather than behind. William and Catherine don't need permission to be admired. They've earned that. What they need now is trust. Real trust. The kind that comes with power, with endorsement, with the ability to steer, not just support. And the question now lingers, like a shadow over Buckingham Palace. Will they be allowed to lead before it's too late? As the world waits for a royal future to begin, the silence from the throne says more than words ever could. Share your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.